We're back. We're here with Dr. Jay Lang. He is the superintendent of the Chelmsford Public Schools. Thank you for coming on Town Talk.
No, thank you very much for having me. Look forward to coming.
Well, we appreciate you being here. As we said earlier, I never knew how much I appreciated the school system being up and running until
Yes.
until it wasn't.
Center days with the kids at home.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Makes everyone appreciate the schools a little bit more.
Yeah, you definitely love your kids more when you can send them off for 6 hours and then bring them back. Believe me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So-
No, that was a tough storm. We're glad to have gotten through it, but we had a couple of days, we really hadn't anticipated not having school. But we had several schools for a couple of days that really just didn't have power. And then even on that second day, when schools were starting to get power back on, still a lot of power lines down in town, or it wouldn't have been safe for kids to get to buses and to walk to schools and things. So we lost a couple of days now. When we prepare our school calendar for the year, we do build in 6 days to the schedule for snow typically, but 2 of those 6 days will get eaten up by the power loss.
Wow.
So we're prepared for it, but the more days we have without school now, the further it just pushes the calendar into June. So we were happy to get back and going that third day.
You just can't predict what's going to happen.
No, we had a funny storm like this before I came to Chelmsford. I remember in the previous district, but we were out of school for 2 or 3 days right around Halloween. That was more of an
October.
ice storm.
Ice storm, yep.
And the ice just froze up on the lines and took all the power down. So it does happen, but we're more used to calling it for snow.
Snow, yeah.
Now, when something like that happens, you would never bring up just a couple of schools. You got to bring the whole system online for everyone to go versus like if you had
Yeah.
power at one school versus the other.
Typically, it's an all or nothing proposition. We did contemplate going into the third day. It looked like South Row was still going to be down, but the rest of the district was going to be up. So we did contemplate having everyone else come back with the exception of South Row because we were confined to just that one neighborhood that didn't have school. Overnight, the last 2 schools for us were Parker and South Row. They both came up at about the same time, so we didn't have to do that. But typically, we really like to have either all on or all off. It's difficult and confusing for families. And
Those parents would not like you, the ones who had their kids at home. That was Joe's.
well, the hard thing for them, no, but the hard thing for them is even, if some schools have it, if your home still doesn't have power, it's very, as you know, it's very difficult to get up and to do your hair and to get dressed
Yes.
and everything for school. Staff have similar problems, and the other thing we do have to consider, even on snow days, is not all our staff work in town. So we really have to kind of take a regional look at what's happening weather-wise, because we've got a lot of staff that commute from pretty significant distances. So we've got to make sure that they can safely get to work and our kids can get to school and, again, get home at the end of the day, so everyone's safe.
What time do you have to make that decision? I mean,
Too early. Too early. We're up anytime our facilities people are on the night. Often, 3 o'clock on. They typically clue me in somewhere between 4 and 5, and then we typically make the call right around 5 to 5:15. So I try to get up around like 4:30, just when they do call, to make sure that I'm fresh and ready for the call. But there are people on the road prior to that really making the decision, telling us what's happening. In a snowstorm, we work with our bus company. We want to actually have a bus on the road to see how the bus is dealing with, traffic or sliding and things like that. Facilities have to make sure that they can get cleaned out for the incoming kids and staff. So it's an early morning decision. But we try to, because we want to give people time to be able to, get to school or to make arrangements for daycare if they need to. We try to make the call between 5 and 5:15, and then we'll put it out in multiple means. We have a Connect Ed system that'll make phone calls and emails home to parents and staff. Lately, we've been posting to Facebook as well, even some of the local sites, to just try to get the word out there. We'll use Twitter. So any kind of means and methods to get the announcement out.
so that Connect Ed, if you're, a parent, you want to be notified, because I get auto calls that come
Sure.
out. Do you guys do that?
Yeah, we do, and that's part of the Connect Ed system. It can send a phone call, or it can send an email, or it can send both.
Okay.
So you get to, your school, kind of designate what your primary number is, and then the system will call your primary number. So if you ever wanted to change that, if you have a move, do you want to move it from a lot of people have their home phone as the primary number, but when power goes down, if you lose, say, your Comcast or your ability to use the phone, you also didn't get the direct calls from us, so you might want to move it to a cell phone and have the
Right.
cell phone be your primary. But that's just a matter of notifying the school secretary, and they can go right on the computer and they can make the change, and then every night it uploads and updates the system. So within 24 hours, you'd be getting your phone, or your calls or your emails to the correct address.
Gone are the days that you used to sit and wait.
You'd you'd listen to the radio
See.
and
No, I remember the TV. You're just like, see, just waiting.
Yeah,
for
well,
it.
we still do the major TV stations,
Yes,
so you can
yes.
do that. When I was a kid, I know you used to listen for the fire station, used to blow the horn if there was no school
no, yeah.
in town. So it's different community by community.
Yeah.
But our big thing is just to try to blanket as many people as we can to get the word out there.
Yeah.
Facebook has been good because, you send the message to one and, people will
Everybody
share
shares
it and
it
try to get it
everywhere.
around.
Yeah.
But that's if the technology's working. That's the other, the issue that we're dealing with.
Well, other than the schools being down, things seem like they're running very well.
Yeah, we're off to a very good year.
What are you typically doing at this point, within the school year? Are you working on budgeting, or, I mean, I'm sure you're doing a whole lot of everything.
Sure.
But
Yeah, I mean, this is part of the year where kind of the rush of September, just getting the schools open and getting everyone back into a routine has kind of occurred. And usually around between Columbus Day weekend and Veterans Day is when things settle in. So we're pretty much settled down at this point. I think our summer projects are all pretty much wrapped up. As you know, we did a lot of construction this summer. We were able to get the modular buildings on site, opened up full-day kindergarten. That's gone off really relatively seamlessly. Very good feedback in town from that. That's all underway at this point. So now we're starting to shift more towards what we're still focused on this year. We're actually now entering budget season. So we're starting to prepare our budgets for fiscal 19, which will start next July 1st. So a lot of the work between now and Christmas is on budget preparation. Individual department meetings within central office and school-based meetings to talk about our priorities and to try to line those up against our planning for the next year that's ahead. So a lot of it is, now that we are settled down, shifting to budgeting. We're going to start talking a lot about recruitment of people and staff for next year. A lot of staff will start to give notice if they're going to retire at the end of the year. We want to be one of the first districts out there to really recruit and attract some good talent to the district for the fall. So a lot of those meetings are starting to take place at this point.
one of the things that seemed to be a problem for the budget in prior years, not necessarily under your administration, but was substitute teachers and sick calls and stuff, and trying to monitor and gauge that. Do you guys still work with Kelly Services, or how do you guys?
We use a little bit of a different system now. I think the year that I was coming, they actually had made a change. They used to contract that service out to Kelly Services. And the year that I came on board, the decision had already been made to switch to ASOP is the name of the software, and to bring the calling service in-house. So we actually now manage our own day-to-day subs. The substitutes themselves work for the district. We have a computer software system that a teacher, if they're going to be out sick, whether it's a sickness or a professional development day, they just log into the system and tell us that they're out, and then the computer system tries to match the substitute to the system. We do have a part-time person that actually kind of manages the behind the scenes to make sure all the calls are being filled. And there's a constant effort on now to recruit highly qualified subs to be able to fill our sub pool. That's ongoing, because often what will happen is subs will come into the system for a day-to-day sub assignment, but then you get to know them a little bit in the buildings and you get a sense of them. And if we ever have an opening, whether it's a paraprofessional opening or a teacher opening, they're a good pool to be able to attract into your district, because you have a sense of how they're going to be work-wise. So then you have to replenish your sub pool. But no, we've actually found that it's a little bit more efficient doing it in-house. It's a little bit more work, but the quality control over the substitute pool is better. And we've actually also cut costs. I don't have the exact number, but I believe we're about $150,000 under what we used to spend in subs going through Kelly.
Wow.
A lot of that is there's an upcharge in basically contracting it out to someone because they're taking a cut off the top. And then there's just some efficiency as well by doing it in-house yourself.
And I'm sure it's also a little bit more consistent what you're getting, just because you have that control over who's who's hired.
Well, we're actually doing the hiring.
Yeah, exactly.
And if people come to work for us, they're actually employees of the Chelmsford Public Schools, and we can train them and we can tell them how we would like things to be. If you work, and there's nothing wrong for working with, say, a Kelly company, but those kind of companies are serving multiple districts, so they're really pulling in subs that might be in Chelmsford one day. They could be in Andover or Lowell or Billerica, and so we really would rather just attract the sub pool and be able to manage it ourselves. We found that that's working very well.
Nice.
So that's obviously something that we'll continue doing.
Yep.
Now, as part of the budgeting process, they had talked about merging both the town side and the school side into one.
The accounting systems.
Like a Munis or
Munis.
something. Have you guys actually accomplished that, or is that still a work
We
in
did. No,
progress?
that was a big accomplishment last year. Tremendous amount of work. It was about a 2-year process. But both the school department and the town were both using Munis. It's a municipal accounting system. But we had different versions that were in place, and technically like 2 different sets of books. So there was a lot of work that had to happen with reconciliation at that point in time. So the decision had been made based on one of the audits. Again, one of the recommendations was to unify and come into the same system. So it took about a year or so. Michelle Cresta, the previous business administrator, and then Joanna Johnson-Collins, the new business administrator, worked very difficult kind of creating a new chart of accounts, having it meld with the town's chart of accounts. And last year, fiscal 17, was the first year that we actually rolled into the same system. So we found it great as far as reporting goes. I know Darlene, Lucia, the treasurer, and John Souza, and Paul Cohen and I, when we sit and have kind of finance meetings, it's working very well for all of us because we're all on the same page as far as accounting. And yeah, that was certainly a big advancement. We're going into year 2 now, kind of rolling that out. And it's still a lot of work to be done, but we're starting to see the results of it.
Now, I know you guys talked about putting together some sort of, school plan, like maybe a 10-year capital plan.
Sure.
Have you guys put that into place, and are we starting to implement on that now, or?
It's in process right now. So when we did the facility assessment, we obviously had the short-term goal of trying to open up the modular classrooms to be able to take care of some of the class size issues we had, but then also implement the full-day K, which we were able to do. And then there was a longer-term plan that involved us applying to the Mass Association of Mass School Building Association for a potential new school in the years to come. So we submitted that application last April. We're still waiting to hear if we're going to be invited into consideration or not. Sometimes that does take a couple of years to kind of get in the queue. But while we're waiting for that notification, the Doran Whittier group that came in to help us with the facility assessment made a lot of different recommendations about different capital needs and building needs. So we're actually going through a process right now of taking all of those recommendations. Internally, Brian Curley, who's our director of facilities, and then on the town side, Gary Persichetti and Kathleen Canavan, kind of working through all their recommendations and seeing if they align to what our previous capital plan was and how we actually feel it would best fit into a 10-year cycle. So between now and December, we'll finish our work. And then one of the 2 meetings in December with the school committee will actually be dedicated to kind of a working meeting with the school committee members to help work through the prioritization of some of these projects so that we can get input from the school committee also to kind of see where they would like to see these projects fall. But then really by the holidays, we'll have finalized our 10-year capital plan, and then that'll be something that we can promote in the years to come.
Now, you talked about the MSBA, which is the Mass School Building
Authority.
Lowell obviously just went through a very tumultuous time with their school project, and obviously there's some site issues. Is there anything to be learned from that process so that when maybe we do get into this cycle, we can make things a little bit smoother than kind of what's been happening over in the city?
Yeah, I mean, it's I was involved a little bit early on in Lowell when we submitted the first application, so I've been through the process before and I know it. I think it became more of a political kind of struggle in Lowell with regard to just the placement of the school. I think anyone you really talk to in Lowell doesn't disagree that there's a need for a new high school, and I think that's going to be the first step that we're going to have to kind of have discussions about in town to, as a community, try to see if we can get some consensus around, do we need a new high school? Do we need a renovated high school? Do we need a middle school / high school? That's, I think, going to be the discussion point that we're going to have to do. Lowell, they agree that they needed a new school. It was really over the site selection, so that's what's still kind of being debated at this point in time. But there's a lot of work that goes into just trying to get community buy-in and consensus around the actual need for the project. And whenever we get that call to be able to start the process, it is a multi-year process, but very similar to the way we did the community visioning sessions to even put the strategic plan together and the comprehensive facilities assessment together. We're going to need to have those outreach meetings again and try to have the community members, whether you have a school-age child or not, be as involved as they possibly can, because ultimately there's going to need to be a vote in town to support whatever project goes forward. And as much, I think, lead work as you can do to make people be informed about what the decisions are and why they're actually being asked to make this vote, it's going to help you in the long run to sell your project.
How important are the facilities when it comes to the educational component of trying to, just raise your school standards? Is it, facilities a huge piece of it, or?
They are. I mean, I think what I have focused on, even in our discussions with the administration and the teachers and school committee, is you don't want your facilities to hamper what kind of programming you want to take place. And I think, as groups, we actually take a look at like what type of programming do we really want to offer, and then make sure that your facilities can match that. At the elementary grade levels, some of our buildings are a little bit older, but they don't need to be quite as technically advanced. I mean, sure, would you love them to be? Yes, but they don't have to be quite as technically advanced as, say, your middle schools and your high schools do, just the way that you're kind of preparing kids for later schooling. But they're important, and I think you never want to get to a point in time where you can't deliver the type of programming you want to because of a facility impediment. One of the things we do run into in all of our buildings at this point in time is just because of the age of them, they aren't wired with as much, say, power, even as you would want or desire, because of all the different technology that we use in the schools. Some of them have a difficulty. You put Wi-Fi in the buildings, but just because of how thick some of the concrete is in the buildings, it's very difficult to pick up a signal or track a signal. So you have to add multiple, wireless access points to be able to do some of our online testing. Last year, one of our capital projects was an upgrade of Parker Middle School for their computer infrastructure, which included a lot of additional wireless access points within the building. And we've seen great outcome and feedback from that. So you're going into year 2 of that plan, and the next year is to actually upgrade McCarthy and then 2 of our elementary schools. I believe it's Center and Harrington. Those were the ones that needed the upgrade next. But it's going to be a multi-year process. But again, you have to be looking mindfully at the programs you want to offer, but be thinking a year or 2 down the line of getting your facilities in shape to be able to have them support your program.
I can't believe how much technology has just taken over, and it's actually a good thing.
Yeah.
I feel like it's helped, with transparency. Parents have a lot more knowledge about what's going on within the school system.
Right.
And you guys even have a kind of a report card system for parents so that they know, where their kids are within the progress standpoint.
Yeah, if you have kids in schools within the department, we use and most school districts do now, use some type of a electronic student management system. Ours is called Aspen, or X2 is the old name of it. But it really invites parents to be part of their child's education. So parents get a login to the system, and they can actually, on a daily basis. I even have for my own, my wife monitors it more than I do, but for our own kids, if a teacher will post a grade, you can get a little alert saying that there's a new grade in or an assignment in. But you can actually log in and check your child's attendance or how they did in a particular assessment, communicate back and forth with the teacher. The amount of email and you don't see a lot of handwritten communication anymore. A lot of it's just email or even just posts through, say, X2 to teachers. So
So you must get ahead of the game before your child's falling, before it was like you got the grade, and then it was almost not too late, but then you're kind of collecting yourself. But now you can get ahead of it, help your child, and talk with the teacher. Right?
Yeah, there's really no excuse to not be in
Yeah.
the moment with your child as they're going through school, or even, taking a look at helping them organize, what kind of assignments they have coming up, or, you have this book report or this project coming up, and be able to take a look at all the different classes. So it definitely is inviting the whole family into the education.
And keeps them more accountable too, the child, in a way.
In a helpful way. I mean, we
Yes,
like to do it
yes.
in a helpful way. It's not that someone's always watching over them, but particularly as the kids go through elementary to middle school to high school, we see a lot of difficulty in kids when they do the transition years. But I was having a lot of discussions this year with parents of students who are going from 6th grade to 7th grade. That's a tough year for kids, because that's kind of the end of the elementary school model, where you have just 1 or 2 teachers all day long with your child. When you get to 7th grade, a lot of the teachers really start to specialize. So you go from having just 2 teachers to 4 or 5, and it's difficult for kids to be able to organize themselves and to be able to prioritize what assignments have to be done. So it's a great way of keeping the families involved. No, we've gotten very good feedback about that.
One last point before we let you go.
Sure.
Seeing you out in the district, I've been dropping my daughter off. You've been kind of camped out at the schools in the morning. Is that a traditional thing you do, or?
I try to, yeah. I mean, I was mentioning earlier, I try to get at least 2 or 3 mornings a week a start in the schools. If you go to the office first, I always find I just get stuck there for the day. There's always something or someone that's going to need your attention. But to be able to really stay grounded with what's happening in the schools, I find it important to be in the schools. So a few mornings a week, I really do just make an effort to, after I drop my own kids off for school, before I actually go to the office, I start in a school. So go in, again, just introduce myself to staff, just walk the buildings, poke into some classrooms, see what's happening instructionally in the buildings, see how I can be of assistance, just to keep a sense of just the feeling of the buildings and what actually is going on. Staff are very good about, coming forward and talking to you, and they like to see you in the schools, and they like to have you be part of their classrooms. The other thing that we did do last year is we started, myself and Linda Hirsch, the assistant superintendent, having some kind of community coffees. People who have kids in the schools oftentimes feel very comfortable to talk to you, but there's a lot of the community that doesn't. So we hosted almost like a monthly kind of meet and greet, so people could just come by and talk to us. We got some really good feedback from that. This year, we're actually going to roll something a little bit different. We're going to have a few of those sessions, but we're also going to have kind of a morning in the different schools. So say it was at Center Elementary School. We'll put out to parents that we'll actually be at Center from, say, 8 to 9:30. If you'd like to drop your child off at school and then actually come in and meet me or talk to me or talk to Linda about any issues that are happening in the schools, just to make ourselves accessible. And then we'll wrap that up and do some kind of school walkthroughs or school tours at the end of it. But people really need to feel comfortable, knowing who you are and why you're in the schools, and if they have any issues, to be able to come forward and talk to you about them. So we're going to continue that. And again, I'd much rather be in the schools, kind of seeing kids and seeing some of the programming that's taking place than doing some of the paperwork behind the scenes. That'll always be there in the time to come.
Well,
Awesome.
there's always time for that.
There is. There is.
Well, we appreciate you coming on the show.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for keeping the Chelmsford Public Schools running.
You're welcome.
Running well.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You too.